The old photographs on my phone are a gallery of a life that no longer exists. There's one of my sister, Clara, and me as kids, her arms slung around my shoulders, her smile bright and carefree. She was always the sun, and I was the satellite orbiting her warmth. We were a team, or so I thought. But looking at that picture now, it feels less like a memory and more like a work of fiction. The story of how our family fell apart, and how I finally started to live, begins with a man I admired, James. Clara's husband was everything she wasn't: stable, kind, and responsible. He was a great guy from a great family, and he brought a new level of comfort to Clara's life. A life she'd always lived for the moment. Their wedding was a fairy tale, paid for by his generous parents, but the magic came with a contract. A prenup. It was a clear, unromantic document that laid out the rules, with an ironclad infidelity clause that said if either of them cheated, they would walk away with nothing but what they came in with. Clara hated it. My mom found it insulting. But in the end, she signed it, lured by the promise of a big wedding and a life of leisure. While Clara was living her storybook life, I was writing my own. For 10 years, I poured every ounce of my energy and a significant portion of my paycheck into a single goal: buying my own small apartment. My life was a quiet, disciplined rhythm of work, saving, and saying no to the small luxuries that my friends and family enjoyed. I didn't go on vacations, and I didn't buy expensive things. My savings account was my security blanket, a testament to my hard work and the future I was building for myself. My family knew all of this, or at least they knew about the savings. I believed they understood its significance. Then, Clara's perfect world came crashing down. She made a terrible mistake, cheating on James with her high school ex-boyfriend. It was a reckless, undisguised act, and James found out. He was devastated, and just as the prenup specified, he threw her out and filed for divorce. Clara, with no job, no savings, and no home, ran straight to my mom's house. That's when the pressure began. My mom and Clara sat me down and explained that all the lawyers had said the same thing. The prenup was airtight. Clara's only hope was a long shot, expensive court battle with an aggressive lawyer who promised a slim chance of success. They then looked at me, my sister and my mother, and asked for $50, zero from my savings, to pay for the legal fees. I was stunned. They wanted me to give them the money I had worked for a decade, money I was saving for my future, to fund a revenge plot against the man Clara had cheated on. I stayed calm and simply said no. The response was immediate and explosive. Clara started screaming at me, calling me selfish and jealous, claiming that I was happy to see her suffer. My mother joined in, lecturing me about my duty to family and how heartless I was for not helping. They insisted that my money was just sitting there, as if my financial stability was some kind of liquid asset they had a right to tap into. I stood my ground, repeating that the money was for my future, and that Clara's situation was a direct result of her own choices. I refused to pay for the consequences of a grenade she herself had pulled the pin on. The first no was just the beginning. The calls and texts were relentless. From Clara, my mom, and even some of my aunts who had only heard Clara's one-sided version of the story. I was the selfish villain, the one hoarding her money while her family was in crisis. I ignored it all, putting my phone on silent, but their tactics only escalated. Clara started a social media campaign, posting vague but pointed stories about selfish family members who would rather watch their loved ones drown than offer a helping hand. I watched as people I knew started to look at me with pity and suspicion. Clara, the master of playing the victim, was doing it again. Only this time, the stakes were my reputation. A few days later, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced, trying a different approach. The tears were back, along with claims that Clara was not eating and that I was pushing her over the edge. She talked about my savings again, saying that I could always make more money, but I only had one sister. When I stood my ground, she changed tactics once more, bringing up my father. He would be ashamed of you, she said, using his memory as a weapon against me. She accused me of thinking I was better than them. The conversation turned ugly, and eventually, I had to threaten to call security to get her to leave. As she walked out, she whispered a final threat that I would regret this when I was old and alone. At that moment, I knew I had to take a stand. I blocked them all, my sister, my mom, and my aunts, but the silence was short-lived. A week of peace was all I got before the next wave of harassment began. They had moved to email. Clara's first email was a mix of accusations and begging, telling me her lawyer had dropped her because she couldn't pay and that this was my last chance to help her get justice. I simply created a filter and moved on. The true escalation came a few days later when my mom showed up at my office. She walked into the lobby and, in a loud, dramatic voice, declared that her daughter was in crisis and I was refusing to help. My face burned with humiliation as she cried and accused me of pretending my family didn't exist. It was a clear and humiliating attempt to use public shame to get what she wanted. The very next day, Clara went even further. She somehow found my work email and sent a new message, not just to me, but also to my boss and HR. So in the email, she made up a completely fabricated story, claiming I was withholding family funds from our father's will and that I was financially abusing her. It was a complete and utter lie, a direct attempt to damage my career and my professional reputation. I was called into my boss's office, forced to explain the entire miserable situation and show them the evidence of my family's harassment. They understood in the end, but the incident was now part of my permanent employee record. I had a lawyer send a formal cease and desist letter to my mother and sister, demanding they stop all contact. This was no longer just about money. It was about revenge and the deliberate attempt to hurt my ability to make a living. I thought the cease and desist letter would be enough. I was naive. The final, horrifying escalation happened at my cousin's wedding. I was hesitant to go, but I didn't want to miss my cousin's big day. I kept a low profile, but I could feel my mom and Clara watching me from across the room. During a quiet moment, Clara walked over to my table, a glass of red wine in her hand. She started with subtle provocations, saying it must be nice to be buying an apartment while she was about to be homeless. I told her it wasn't the time or place, but she didn't stop. She used the same line my mom had, saying I was cold and selfish, just like our father. When I stood to walk away, she did the unthinkable. She threw the entire glass of red wine all over my light-colored dress. The shock was followed by a wave of pure rage. But before I could do anything, she lunged at me, trying to scratch my face and screaming that I had ruined her life. A few of my friends and cousins pulled her off of me. My mother rushed over, not to help, but to defend Clara and yell at me, asking what I had done to set her off. The wedding was in shambles, my cousin in tears. The venue security eventually had to escort them both out. I was left there, shaking and covered in wine, with scratches on my arms and neck. The next day, I went to the police station. I filed a formal report for assault against Clara and provided them with witness names and contact information. I was done being passive. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore. It was a matter of my physical safety. I also began the process of getting a restraining order against both of them. I never thought I would take legal action against my own family, but they had left me with no other choice. This will be my final chapter on this story. The legal process moved forward. There were plenty of witnesses to the wedding incident, and a judge granted a restraining order against both Clara and my mom after hearing my testimony and seeing all the evidence. They are now legally required to stay away from me, my home, and my workplace. The closing on my apartment went through without issue. It's a small place, but it's mine. It's my quiet, safe fortress, where no one can show up unannounced. Moving in has been a welcome distraction, a tangible sign of a new, independent life. In the wider family, the aftermath has been grim. No one is taking their side anymore after the spectacle at the wedding. My aunts, who were so quick to judge me, have been completely silent. I've heard through my cousin that my mom and Clara are now isolated, their relationship strained and filled with constant arguments. Clara's divorce from James is final. And as expected, The prenup was fully enforced. She got nothing. She had to sell her car just to cover some of her initial legal fees. My mom, on a fixed retirement income, can't afford to support her forever. My life is much quieter now, but it's also lonelier. My mother and sister, for all their terrible faults, were a significant part of my life. The old photographs on my phone are a reminder of a past that is now officially gone. But I have my new home, my safety, and my peace of mind. I stood my ground, and I protected myself. And while it cost me my family, it gave me my life back.